The call came at 4:52 p.m. I remember the time because I was already watching the clock in the corner of my screen, waiting for the office to empty. Friday afternoons always slowed down like that, voices lower, keyboards quieter, people mentally stepping into their weekends before their bodies followed. Nobody schedules good news at 4:52 on a Friday. The conference room had glass walls and no windows. Bright lights, too bright, reflecting off the polished table in a way that made it impossible to look anywhere without seeing yourself. The air smelled faintly of disinfectant and old coffee. Mark Ellison from legal was already seated. Senior counsel. 11 years with the company. There was a folder on the table. Thick. My name printed cleanly on the tab. He didn't offer me a seat. He didn't offer me water. Thanks for coming on short notice, he said, folding his hands together. I'll be direct. That was when I knew it was planned. We're terminating your contract effective end of business today. The words were neat. Professional. Delivered like a conclusion that had already been agreed upon somewhere I wasn't invited to. I sat down slowly. The chair scraped against the floor, the sound louder than it should have been. On what grounds? I asked. Restructuring, he said. Budget realignment. Your role is no longer viable going forward. My heartbeat felt uneven, like it was missing steps. I glanced at the folder, then at the wall clock behind him. 4:54 p.m. Tomorrow was the 15th. At midnight tonight, my revenue share agreement crossed its vesting threshold. 5 years. Quarterly performance benchmarks. A licensing payout tied directly to product adoption. I had hit every metric. At 12 a.m., the share became irrevocable. Just under $3.9 million. I'd marked the date months ago on a paper calendar I kept in my desk drawer. Red ink. I didn't trust digital reminders for something that important. Mark slid the folder toward me. This is your separation package, he said. It's generous, considering the circumstances. I didn't open it. Is the timing intentional? I asked. His jaw tightened for a fraction of a second, too fast to notice, unless you were watching closely. These decisions are never about timing, he said. They're operational. I nodded. Inside my chest, something cold spread outward, slow and deliberate. I was escorted out at 5:01 p.m. Security hovered near my desk, pretending not to. HR waited with a cardboard box that smelled like dust and storage closets. My badge had already been deactivated. I packed quickly. Laptop charger. Notebook. A pen I liked more than I should have. My coffee mug, cracked near the handle. My phone buzzed as I folded the box shut. Evelyn, call me. Now. I stepped into the stairwell instead. Evelyn Park had been my attorney for 6 years. I hired her after watching a former partner sign away future royalties because he trusted the relationship. I stopped trusting relationships after that. They did it, didn't they? She asked the moment I called. End of business today, I said. There was a pause on the line. Then she exhaled. Good. Don't sign anything. Don't reply to anything. Send me every document they give you. They're cutting it close, I said. I know, she replied. That's the point. If you've ever been called into a room like that, if you've ever felt a company smile while quietly taking something from you, you're not alone. If stories like this matter to you, subscribe to this channel. These aren't rage stories. They're about knowing your ground when the pressure starts. The email arrived at 5:18 p.m. 17 minutes after I was walked out. Someone had it queued. The agreement was 14 pages long. Clean. Confident. Written by people who expected compliance. Confidentiality. Non-disparagement. Release of claims. Section 11 made my stomach tighten. Vesting shall occur at midnight hours on the anniversary calendar date, irrespective of business hours or employment status at that time. My hands started to shake. I forwarded the agreement to Evelyn. Her response came back in under a minute. Evelyn, congratulations, Arya. Don't acknowledge receipt. Wait. The waiting was worse than the firing. At 11:30 p.m., I sat on my couch with the lights off, watching the city glow through my window. Somewhere nearby, people were laughing. A television played through thin apartment walls. At 11:59, I logged into the revenue portal. It spun. Loaded. Spun again. At exactly midnight, the page refreshed. Vested. 100%. Effective. 1 second. I took screenshots. Then recordings. Then downloaded the statement. I sent everything to Evelyn. She replied with one word. Perfect. Saturday passed like a dream I couldn't wake from. I checked the portal over and over, half expecting the numbers to disappear. They didn't. Sunday was worse. At 7:46 p.m., an email came and marked urgent. Please confirm receipt of your separation agreement and return signed documents by close of business Monday. Close of business. They still thought time was on their side. Evelyn called 10 minutes later. They're going to push hard tomorrow, she said. Calls. Threats. Pressure. What happens if I don't fold? I asked. They escalate, she said. And if they escalate legally, they open discovery. I swallowed. Is that good? It's catastrophic for them, she said. If they plan this. I stared at my dark phone screen. I think they did. Then let them make the first move. At 9:02 a.m. Monday, my phone started ringing. I didn't answer. By noon, the tone changed. There appears to be confusion. We need to resolve this quickly. At 1:11 p.m., Evelyn forwarded me her letter to their general counsel. Precise. Cold. Unforgiving. At 3:04 p.m., a new email arrived. Subject: Settlement discussion. The number inside was $1.2 million. I laughed, not because it was funny, but because it meant one thing. They were afraid. And fear makes people sloppy. I didn't sleep much that night. Not because I was excited. Because my body wouldn't accept that the danger had passed. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Mark's face in that glass-walled room. The way his jaw tightened when I asked about timing. The way he'd said operational like it was a shield. At 6:12 a.m., my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I let it ring. At 6:18, an email arrived. From Mark Ellison. Subject: Urgent. Need to clarify equity issue. The word clarify sat there like a lie pretending to be polite. I didn't open it. By 7:30, there were 3 more missed calls. 2 voicemails. 1 text. Arya, this is Mark. We need to resolve this quickly before things get complicated. Before things get complicated. They already were. I made coffee I didn't drink and stood at my kitchen counter watching steam rise from the mug like it was doing something useful. My hands were steady, but my chest felt tight, like I was bracing for impact without knowing where it would land. Evelyn called at exactly 8:01 a.m. They're panicking early, she said. That's good for us. Mark's calling, I told her. Of course he is. Don't answer. What if I should? No, she said firmly. The first person who speaks loses leverage. I sat down at my table. What happens next? They'll try pressure without paper first, she said. Friendly tone. Then urgency. Then guilt. After that, lawyers. I thought Mark was a lawyer. He is, she said. But he's not their general counsel. When the real lawyers step in, the temperature drops. As if on cue, my inbox refreshed. From Thomas Reed. Title: General Counsel. Subject: Equity vesting clarification. I stared at the name. This was the temperature drop. Thomas Reed's email was 6 sentences long. No accusations. No threats. Just concern. The number inside was $1.2 million. I laughed, not because it was funny, but because it meant one thing. They were afraid. And fear makes people sloppy. I didn't sleep much that night. Not because I was excited. Because my body wouldn't accept that the danger had passed. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Mark's face in that glass-walled room. The way his jaw tightened when I asked about timing. The way he'd said operational like it was a shield. At 6:12 a.m., my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I let it ring. At 6:18, an email arrived. From Mark Ellison. Subject: Urgent. Need to clarify equity issue. The word clarify sat there like a lie pretending to be polite. I didn't open it. By 7:30, there were 3 more missed calls. 2 voicemails. 1 text. Arya, this is Mark. We need to resolve this quickly before things get complicated. Before things get complicated. They already were. I made coffee I didn't drink and stood at my kitchen counter watching steam rise from the mug like it was doing something useful. My hands were steady, but my chest felt tight, like I was bracing for impact without knowing where it would land. Evelyn called at exactly 8:01 a.m. "They're panicking early," she said. "That's good for us." "Mark's calling," I told her. "Of course he is." "Don't answer." "What if I should?" "No," she said firmly. "The first person who speaks loses leverage." I sat down at my table. "What happens next?" "They'll try pressure without paper first," she said. Friendly tone. Then urgency. Then guilt. After that, lawyers. I thought Mark was a lawyer. "He is," she said. "But he's not their general counsel. When the real lawyers step in, the temperature drops." As if on cue, my inbox refreshed. From Thomas Reed. Title: General Counsel. Subject: Equity Vesting Clarification. I stared at the name. This was the temperature drop. Thomas Reed's email was 6 sentences long. No accusations. No threats. Just concern. He wrote that there appeared to be a discrepancy between my understanding of the vesting language and the company's intent. That they wanted to resolve the matter amicably. That litigation would be unfortunate for everyone involved. "Please have your counsel contact me today." I forwarded it to Evelyn without comment. Her reply came back fast. "Good. They've acknowledged the contract. Now we anchor the facts." At 9:14 a.m., she sent her letter. I read it 3 times before I could breathe normally. It was calm in a way I couldn't be. Dates. Clauses. Screenshots. Times down to the second. She stated plainly that my revenue share vested at 1 second. That my termination occurred hours later. That any attempt to claw back vested compensation would constitute breach of contract. She attached evidence. She concluded with one sentence that made my throat tighten. "My client expects full access to her vested compensation without interference. No apologies. No softness. Just position." The silence afterward was unbearable. No calls. No emails. I checked the portal again. Still there. At 11:46 a.m., my phone rang. Private number. I didn't answer. A voicemail followed. "Arya, this is Thomas Reed. I believe there's been a misunderstanding. I'd appreciate the opportunity to speak with you directly." Misunderstanding. That word again. Evelyn called 5 minutes later. "They're testing boundaries," she said. "Seeing if you'll talk without me." "I won't." "I know. What if they sue?" She didn't hesitate. "Then they expose themselves." That didn't comfort me the way she probably meant it to. At 2:38 p.m., the first offer arrived. $950,000. It was framed as generosity. A compromise. A way to avoid drawn-out conflict. My stomach flipped. "Less than a quarter," I said when I called Evelyn. "They're anchoring low," she replied. "Trying to make future numbers feel reasonable." "I hate that this feels like negotiation over my life." "That's exactly what it is," she said. "And you're doing fine." By 4:10 p.m., a second email followed. This one less friendly. "Failure to engage may result in formal action." I read it twice. "They're escalating," I said. "Yes," Evelyn replied. "And that means they're running out of options." I stared out my window at the city, people walking fast, unaware that a corporation was deciding whether to try to destroy me publicly to save money. "Evelyn." "Yes." "I'm scared." She paused, not long, but enough to matter. "That means you understand the stakes," she said. "Fear isn't weakness here. It's information." That night, I barely touched dinner. At 10:17 p.m., an email came in that made my breath catch. Subject: Notice of intent. They were preparing to file. I sat on the floor with my back against the couch, phone in my hand, reading legal language that implied I'd acted in bad faith. That I'd exploited a technicality. That I'd violated trust. They were rewriting the story. At 10:31, Evelyn called. "They're bluffing," she said. "How do you know?" "Because if they file, discovery starts. And if discovery starts, we find out why your termination happened when it did." I closed my eyes. "What if they don't care?" "They do," she said. "Companies always do. Because discovery doesn't just expose mistakes. It exposes patterns." That word stayed with me. Patterns. If you've ever felt this moment, The waiting, the pressure, the sense that something larger is moving around you. You're not weak for feeling it. Stories like this aren't just entertainment. They're reminders. If you want to hear how these battles actually unfold, subscribe to this channel. Because knowing the process changes how much power fear has over you. At 8:57 a.m. the next morning, they filed. I found out from the notification, not from them. Complaint for declaratory relief and breach of duty. They were suing me, claiming I had manipulated contract language, that I'd acted deceptively, that the vesting clause was never meant to apply this way. My name was on the first page, over and over again. I felt something break loose in my chest, not panic, not anger. Resolve. Evelyn arrived at my apartment an hour later with a legal pad and a calm expression that scared me more than if she'd been worried. They just made a very big mistake, she said. How? She looked at me. They put their intent into play. The lawsuit felt heavier once it was real. Not because of the paper. Because of what it implied. They weren't just trying to take the money back anymore. They were trying to redefine me. The complaint painted a version of me I barely recognized: calculating, deceptive, opportunistic. It implied that everything I'd done over the last 5 years had been part of a long con. That I'd negotiated the vesting language with hidden intent. That I'd waited patiently, counting down to midnight like a thief watching a vault timer. I read the document sitting at my kitchen table, the same place I'd eaten breakfast for years before work. My coffee went cold untouched. They weren't attacking the clause. They were attacking my character. That was the point. Evelyn sat across from me, flipping through pages with a yellow highlighter. They're going to try to make this personal, she said. Not because it's relevant. Because it's effective. Effective how? At exhausting you, she said. At making you doubt yourself. At making you want it to stop badly enough that you'll accept less. I swallowed. They're saying I acted in bad faith. They always do, she replied. Bad faith is a flexible accusation. It sounds serious, but it's hard to prove. It still feels dirty. That's intentional. The first article appeared 2 days later. Not a major outlet. An industry blog. The headline didn't mention my name, but it didn't need to. Former senior contributor in revenue dispute following termination. It framed the situation as a misunderstanding. A disagreement over interpretation. It quoted an unnamed company spokesperson emphasizing ethical standards and internal trust. Trust. I stared at the word longer than I should have. By evening, 2 more pieces followed. Slightly sharper. Slightly less neutral. One suggested I was exploiting a loophole. Another implied the company was a victim of clever legal maneuvering. No outright lies. Just enough framing to make people choose sides. My phone started buzzing. Former coworkers. People I hadn't spoken to in years. Some were supportive. Others were cautious. A few didn't say anything at all, but I could feel the silence. Is this going to ruin me? I asked Evelyn that night. She didn't answer immediately. No, she said finally. But it's going to try. Discovery began quietly. No courtroom drama. No raised voices. Just emails. Requests. Deadlines. Evelyn's team sent their first set of document demands on a Tuesday morning. Internal communications related to my termination. Equity policy discussions. Cost reduction strategies. Executive emails mentioning my role. The company responded by pushing back. Overbroad. Irrelevant. Burdensome. They delayed. They objected. They stalled. And then, something shifted. Evelyn started using a word she hadn't used before. Interesting. She said it twice on Thursday. 3 times on Friday. What does interesting mean? I asked. It means they're nervous, she said. And they should be. That weekend was the worst. There was nothing to do but wait. I cleaned my apartment twice. Reorganized my closet. Went for long walks without direction. Every time my phone buzzed, my stomach dropped. Sunday night, I dreamed about clocks. Digital ones. Analog ones. Red numbers counting down. I woke up before dawn with my heart racing and the sensation that I'd missed something important. At 7:23 a.m., Evelyn texted. We received the first production. My hands shook as I typed back. Anything bad? She called instead. Arya, she said, and her voice was different now, focused, sharp. They kept everything. What do you mean? I mean emails, calendars, Slack messages, drafts, discussions about timing. I sat down hard on the edge of my bed. Discussions about me? Yes. I closed my eyes. Were they careful? I asked. She exhaled. No. They had started talking about me months before the termination. Not performance. Not restructuring. Timing. One email thread caught Evelyn's attention immediately. A senior finance executive asking whether my upcoming vesting event posed an avoidable exposure. Another responding with a spreadsheet attachment showing projected savings if certain senior contributors exited before key dates. My name appeared in the third column. No commentary. Just numbers. They reduced you to a line item, Evelyn said quietly. That matters. Is it enough? It's the beginning. The pressure escalated fast after that. The company filed a motion to limit discovery, then another to seal certain documents. At the same time, a new settlement offer arrived. $2.1 million. No apology. No admission. Just a deadline. 48 hours. They're trying to close the door before we open it wider, Evelyn said. What if I say no? They'll threaten you again. And if I say yes? You walk away richer, she said. But wondering what else was there. That night, I sat alone with the decision. I could end it. Take the money. Disappear. The thought was tempting. But every time I imagined signing, I felt something twist in my chest. It wasn't pride. It was something quieter. A sense that this wasn't just about me anymore. I thought about the younger engineers I'd mentored. The ones who trusted that contracts meant what they said. The ones who didn't have lawyers on speed dial. I thought about how easily this could happen again. How many times it already had. When Evelyn called the next morning, I already knew my answer. We're not settling, I said. She smiled on the other end of the line. I could hear it. Good, she said. Because what we found next changes the entire case. My breath caught. What did you find? She paused. A pattern. If you've ever reached a moment where walking away feels easier, but staying feels necessary, that crossroads matters. If you want to see how pressure really works behind closed doors, subscribe to this channel. These stories aren't about being fearless. They're about deciding what fear gets to control. Evelyn sent me a file an hour later. 5 names. 5 dates. 5 terminations. All within days, sometimes hours, of major vesting events. Different teams. Different managers. Same outcome. They didn't just do this to you, she said. They made it policy. My hands went cold. And they documented it, she added. I stared at the screen, the names blurring slightly. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was a system. And systems, once exposed, don't survive quietly. The first time I saw the emails, I felt embarrassed for them. Not angry. Not vindicated. Embarrassed. They were sloppy in a way that only powerful people get sloppy, comfortable, confident that no one would ever read what they wrote to each other. Evelyn laid the documents out across my dining table like evidence in a crime show. Printed. Highlighted. Tabbed. This one first, she said. It was an internal email from finance to legal, sent 6 months before my termination. Subject: Q3 cost optimization targets. The body was short. If we reduce senior contributor equity exposure before upcoming vesting events, projected savings exceed $11.6 million over the next 2 quarters. Below it was a reply. Understood. Please flag any individuals with significant vesting cliffs approaching. Legal will advise on timing. Timing. I stared at the word until it lost meaning. They didn't even hide it, I said. No, Evelyn replied. They never thought they'd have to. The next document was worse. A spreadsheet. Names. Dates. Dollar amounts. My name sat neatly in row 12. Projected savings, $3.9 million. Next to it, a note in a different column. Termination prior to vesting recommended. My hands started to shake. They quantified it, I whispered. Yes, Evelyn said. And they circulated it. There were comments attached. One executive asking whether the approach carried reputational risk. Another responding that NDAs had historically contained fallout. Contained. Like a spill. By Wednesday afternoon, Evelyn's tone had changed completely. This wasn't defense anymore. This was leverage. They're exposed, she said. And they know it. How can you tell? Because they stopped arguing interpretation, she replied. Now they're arguing procedure. The company's lawyers filed motions asking the court to limit what could be shared, to seal records, to delay further discovery. They weren't saying the emails were irrelevant. They were saying they were too sensitive. That told us everything. At the same time, the calls started again. Not from Mark. Not from Thomas. From people higher up. Executives I'd only seen in all-hands meetings. Voices I recognized from recorded announcements. They didn't leave voicemails. They sent emails. Carefully worded. Concerned. Measured. We'd like to resolve this amicably. This has become larger than intended. There may be mutual benefit in bringing this to a close. Mutual benefit. I forwarded everything to Evelyn. Her reply was one sentence. Now we decide what this is worth. The revised offer arrived Thursday morning. $3.6 million. Nearly the full amount. Still with conditions. Confidentiality. No admission. No changes to company policy. They're trying to buy silence, I said. Yes, Evelyn replied. And silence is expensive. I don't want this to happen again. She nodded. Then we don't just negotiate money. That afternoon, she drafted our counter-proposal. I watched her type, each sentence precise, deliberate. Full equity payout. Legal fees covered. Public withdrawal of claims. And one more thing. Policy revision. Clear, unambiguous vesting language. Applied retroactively to any employee terminated within 30 days of a vesting event over the past 3 years. I looked up at her. They'll never agree to that. They will, she said. Or they'll explain these emails to a jury. The response came faster than I expected. Too fast. They asked for a meeting. In person. Friday morning. Downtown. Neutral location. Evelyn smiled when she read it. They're done, she said. They just don't know how to admit it yet. The conference room was nothing like the first one. Leather chairs. Floor-to-ceiling windows. A view of the city that made everything feel smaller. 4 of them sat across from us. None of them met my eyes at first. Thomas Reed did the talking. Ms. Arya, he said carefully, we believe there's been an unfortunate series of misinterpretations. Evelyn didn't let him finish. You fired her hours before vesting to save millions, she said. You documented it. You repeated it. And you sued her when she didn't accept it quietly. Silence. I watched Thomas's throat move when he swallowed. We're prepared to make this right, he said. How? I asked. It was the first time I'd spoken. He looked at me then. By resolving the matter fully. They agreed to everything except one thing. The policy change. That would set a precedent, one of them said. I leaned forward slightly. You already set the precedent, I said. I'm just asking you to stop it. The room went quiet again. Outside the windows, clouds moved slowly across the sky, shadows sliding over buildings. Evelyn broke the silence. If this goes to trial, she said, the precedent will be public. This is your chance to choose how it's written. Thomas closed his folder. We need a brief recess, he said. They left the room. I exhaled for what felt like the first time in weeks. You okay? Evelyn asked. I think so, I said. I just didn't expect it to feel like this. Like what? Like the moment before something breaks. She nodded. That's because it is. If you've ever watched power shift quietly, not with shouting, but with paperwork and patience, you know how unsettling it feels. If these stories resonate, subscribe to this channel. Not for drama. For clarity. They came back 10 minutes later. Thomas didn't sit down. We agree to the policy revision, he said. With limited confidentiality around proprietary information only. Evelyn looked at me. I nodded. As we gathered our things, Thomas stopped me near the door. You understand this will change how the company operates, he said. I met his eyes. It already has, I replied. The documents were finalized on a Monday. Not dramatically. Not ceremoniously. Just quietly, like something heavy being set down after being carried too far for too long. 17 pages. Dense language. Every word weighed. Evelyn read them aloud line by line, not because I needed to hear them, but because hearing them made the reality sink in. Full payout. Immediate transfer. Legal fees covered. Claims withdrawn. Policy revisions adopted and enforced. No admission of wrongdoing. That part didn't surprise me. Corporations apologize by changing behavior, not by saying sorry. When I signed, my hand didn't shake. I noticed that. For weeks, everything I touched had felt unstable: my phone, my coffee cup, my own thoughts. But the pen felt solid in my fingers. When I finished, Evelyn closed the folder and smiled. "It's done," she said. I waited for relief to rush in. It didn't. Not yet. The money hit my account that afternoon. I refreshed the page 3 times before I trusted it. The number sat there, unblinking. Real. Mine. I didn't celebrate. I didn't call anyone. I just sat on the edge of my couch and stared at the screen until my breathing slowed to something normal again. Winning doesn't feel the way people imagine it does. It feels quiet. And a little hollow. The internal fallout started almost immediately. I didn't hear it directly. It came through people who still worked there. Messages phrased carefully. Hesitant calls. Mark Ellison was reassigned temporarily. Thomas Reed took an extended leave. A senior finance executive resigned within the month. No press releases. No announcements. Just absence. The policy update circulated internally 2 weeks later. Clear language. No ambiguity. No room for timing games. I read it twice. This time, my name wasn't anywhere in it. That mattered more than I expected. One afternoon, a former coworker called me. We hadn't spoken in years. "I heard what happened," she said. "Thank you." "For what?" "For not taking the first offer," she replied. "For not letting it disappear." I didn't know how to respond to that. After we hung up, I sat quietly for a long time. Fear had kept me going for weeks. Purpose was harder to process. If you've ever wondered whether holding your ground matters, whether one decision can ripple outward in ways you will never fully see, this is one of those moments. If stories like this help you feel less alone in complicated fights, subscribe to this channel. Not because the battles are glamorous, but because understanding them changes how you walk into the next one. Life didn't immediately transform. I still woke up early out of habit. Still checked my email too often. Still flinched when my phone rang unexpectedly. But slowly the noise faded. The tension left my shoulders. The constant vigilance eased. I started sleeping through the night again. 3 weeks later, Evelyn and I met for coffee. Not to discuss strategy. Just coffee. "You did something important," she said, stirring her cup. "I didn't plan to." "That's usually how it happens," she replied. "People don't set out to change systems. They just refuse to be crushed by them." I thought about that on the walk home. About how close I'd come to signing away the problem just to make it stop. About how easy silence would have been. The emails didn't stop completely. People reached out quietly, cautiously. Questions about contracts. About vesting language. About timing. I answered when I could. Not as a crusade. Just as someone who understood how sharp the edges could be. By the end of the year, the case had faded into memory for most people. For me, it stayed. Not as anger. Not as pride. As clarity. I understood something now that I hadn't before. Power isn't loud. It doesn't announce itself. Sometimes it's just the willingness to sit in fear long enough to see what breaks first. 6 months passed before I could think about it without my chest tightening. Not because the case lingered, it was over, sealed, resolved, but because my body had learned a new language during those weeks. One made of waiting, listening, bracing. It took time to unlearn that. I didn't rush into anything afterward. No celebratory purchases. No dramatic life changes. I let things stay ordinary. I kept my apartment. Kept my routines. Kept my mornings quiet. Money changes what you can do, but it doesn't automatically tell you who to be next. I needed space before I decided that. The policy revision went live company-wide that summer. I heard about it through someone I used to mentor, an engineer who messaged me a screenshot with one sentence underneath. "They can't do it anymore." That was when the weight finally lifted. Not when the funds cleared. Not when the settlement was signed. But when the door closed behind the behavior that caused it, people still asked how it felt. To win. To beat them. To walk away with more than most people ever see. I never had a clean answer. It didn't feel like winning. It felt like surviving something quietly dangerous. What stayed with me wasn't the money. It was the memory of sitting alone on my couch, watching a clock tick toward midnight, knowing that everything hinged on whether words written years earlier would be honored or twisted. That moment changed how I read everything. Emails. Agreements. Promises. Not with suspicion, but with attention. I started saying no more often. Not defensively. Just clearly. No to urgency that wasn't mine. No to pressure disguised as opportunity. No to conversations that relied on imbalance. It surprised people. It surprised me. One afternoon, I cleaned out a box I'd been avoiding since the termination. Old notebooks. Loose papers. A red ink calendar page folded carefully at the bottom. March 15th. Circled. I held it for a long time before putting it back. Some things you don't throw away. Not because they hurt, but because they remind you what you endured without breaking. I never went back to that company's industry. Not out of bitterness. Out of clarity. I wanted work that didn't require counting days until something was finally acknowledged. Work that didn't make timing feel like a threat. That took time too. But it came. If you're watching this and you're in the middle of something that feels unfair, confusing, or quietly suffocating, know this. Understanding doesn't arrive all at once. Sometimes it shows up at midnight. Sometimes it shows up in a footnote. Sometimes it shows up when you decide not to look away. If stories like this help you see your own situation more clearly, subscribe to this channel. Not for drama. For perspective. I still get messages from time to time. People asking what they should do. What they should look for. Whether it's worth pushing back. I never tell them what choice to make. I just tell them to read carefully. Because most harm doesn't come from cruelty. It comes from assumptions about fairness, about timing, about who's paying attention. And once you stop assuming, you stop being invisible. That's what stayed with me. Not the lawsuit. Not the money. The knowledge that silence only protects you if you choose it. And that sometimes, the bravest thing you can do is wait, watch, and refuse to sign away what was already yours.